Yes, I'm here with Ian, and we're going to summarize and discuss the story Mayala from The Turnip Princess and Other Newly Discovered Fairy Tales by Franz Xavier von Schonwerth. Ian, do you want to give a summary and then we'll talk about it?
I will do my best. I've got the book here, so I'm going to be looking down at it, but we'll see how this goes. Um, so we start off with this man, handsome young man named Veri, Veri, and he lives in a village and is madly in love with this beautiful girl, the most beautiful girl imaginable, named Anna Mayala. Mayala. And now Anna's really poor, but she's very beautiful, and there are many men who are sort of after her, which causes, Anna and Very quite a bit of stress. But Very's persistence pays off, and a date is set for their wedding. And for a moment, everything seems like it's going in a good direction. However, we are told that Very is a bit wild, a bit of a daydreamer, and occasionally sings shocking songs about the underworld, and is known as Crazy Very. Um, so paint this picture of this handsome man in love with this beautiful girl, and then all of a sudden the handsome man is also a little crazy, a little wacky. So it's an interesting short little paragraph to start off the story. Um, Now, the day of the wedding, he decides to go down into the forest to catch some game, to kind of help with the feast, the wedding feast, the celebrations, and returns with a big deer, a big buck over his back. Um, but he's walking through the village, but he's not thinking about his bride. His mind is wandering to the strangest of places. And during that, while his mind is wandering around the underworld, crazy songs, who knows where he's going, he comes across a footbridge. It turns out the moon had already risen and was shining down on the footbridge in the water, and he becomes annoyed with himself for being so late and missing the chance to, be with his wife to be, the night before their wedding. So he sort of pops out of his his daydreaming to realize it's nighttime, and he sort of missed his chance to spend these last few moments with his fiance. Um, so in this sort of dark mood, upset with himself, he goes over the stream, and he looks down and he sees the moon is reflected in the waters, and he slows down and grows even more melancholy. And he kneels down and sort of listens to the water, hoping he might hear something. Not sure why he would assume he would hear something in the water, but here we go. And he does. He hears some sweet melodies. The longer he listened to them, the more beautiful they became, and the more they enchanted him. He gets closer and closer to the water. He's listening more and more, and he begins to think about how lovely it would be to sink down into the water. He starts to look down into the water, and he sees the most beautiful legs he had ever seen dancing around. He raises his eyes and sees some beautiful, charming young girls dancing gracefully to this music that he's been hearing. And one of them in particular really catches his eye. Um, he asks her what it's like down in the water, and she reaches up and puts her face on his shoulder and says mournfully, "Oh, it's so lovely where we live. It's peaceful. There's more air and more life where we dwell. Will you come with me?" And he agrees, all of a sudden ready to abandon his wife, who he was a little upset about not spending time with a bit ago. But then she adds that one time that before she had lived above the waters as well, and she knows that he's engaged. And she says, "Will you be able to forget about her? If you come with me, you won't be able to think about her anymore. If you do, there will be harsh punishments." And then it says, "She looked him in the eye in a manner so charming that he embraced her." So I think maybe a little manipulative on her part. Asks this genuine question that he needs to come to a good decision on, and then she sort of charms him into going with her. But he goes with her, and the ground breaks away, and he sinks down and disappears. And the next morning, everybody in the village is wondering where he is and why he hasn't returned, and they look everywhere, but they only find his musket and the dead stag on the bridge. That's it. They can't find him. And scene one. Uh, Scene two, many years have passed. It says one Tuesday, a wedding procession happened to be making its way to the church, and the bride was beautiful and delightful as a rose. She was also named Anna Mayala, and her father and mother were walking to the church with her to celebrate her marriage. Um, the mother looked very pale, as though she seemed to be ailing, but she was not yet that old and retained some traces of great beauty. The procession makes its way over a bridge, again, over a bridge. The mother breathes a deep sigh, and the father comforts her. And he says, "Isn't it better to live in the present than the past? We've had such a good life together. And doesn't your daughter, who has your name, look just like you?" And this slightly ill appearing woman sort of nestles into her husband and I assume feels somewhat comforted. Um, then, as they are walking across this bridge and heading to the church, a wild man appears with his hair flowing back in the breeze, and he runs down right up to the bridge and begins pounding on his forehead. And he grabs the bride, grabs the girl, and claims that she is his bride. And he says, "It's true, I abandoned you, but that was just yesterday, and you must still come with me to be married." And the actual groom knocks him aside, knocks him over. This groom's a pretty strong guy, knocks this wild man down. And the mother is trembling and near collapse, but everybody kind of keeps moving along with the wild man sort of knocked to the side of the road. Um, 2 days later, the same young woman, now a young wife, goes down to the stream to fetch some water, and the wild man appears again and starts grabbing at her and doesn't want to leave. Um, the new husband is comes by and chases him off a second time, and there are reports that he continues to hang around the village asking about people who had been dead for years. And then he's seen at the pastor's house, and then after that he's not seen again, and no one hears about him for a long time. So something the pastor did seems to have resolved this particular madman's issues. Um, that's sort of the end of scene two. Scene three, some years later, a Franciscan monk began to appear in the village every year. He was pale and handsome, but he also seemed to be sort of ailing. And whenever he was there, he liked to stay at Anna Mayala's house. I'm assuming in this case it means the older one, rather than the younger one. You notice there have been sort of two. It comes to pass that Anna Mayala's husband dies, and the monk appears to comfort her. And he says, "My dear lady, life is hard. Look at me and all that I have suffered, and then you will not feel as much pain as you do now." And this older woman looks at this Franciscan monk, stares at him for a moment, and then becomes frightened, for she recognizes him as Veri, the boy who had long ago abandoned her on the night of their wedding. And now it is his turn to be upset, um, because he knows that she sees him, and he knows that sort of his past has been revealed.
Mm.
Um, but he takes a deep breath and he says, "I lived down with the sprites in the water for a long time. I had a beautiful, enchanting mermaid as my wife. She was always with me, except on Fridays when she became invisible. I might have been completely happy with her, but there was always this empty feeling that I could never satisfy. Um, it tortured me, and I couldn't find a way to make things better. My wife was simply not a normal woman. Her feet were always bound with ribbons, and she never took them off. And she gave birth to 6 children of mine, and their feet were bound in ribbons as well. And each child, after they were went, let's see, when she gives birth to the next child,
Mm.
the previous one is no longer an infant. So they all grow up very, very quickly. It's sort of an inhuman timeline we've got
Mm.
here. He continues, "The mystery of the feet continued to torture me. And one evening while my wife was sleeping, I undid the ribbons and discovered that she had feet like a goose, webbed with little claws on the end of each toe. I flew into a rage, and I hoped and cursed and prayed that the seventh child, it's fairy tale, so seventh children are always the important one. The seventh child would be human with human feet, and my prayers came true. Now, when the mermaid wife sees the child with the human feet, she is possibly justifiably horrified. Not quite sure um, how that would have happened, and she starts screaming at this man. And then all the other mermaids who came along to celebrate the birth of this child also freak out and get very enraged, and they take the child and they tear it into pieces and greedily devour it because apparently human flesh endows mermaids with youth. Yeah, sorry, endows mermaids with
Mm.
beauty and youth for 300 years and makes men fall passionately in love with them. Which that little sentence kind of gets young Very off the hook at least a little bit. If the mermaids had previously devoured some infants. Um, Any case, Very continues that he could do nothing but watch his wife and the other mermaids tear his child apart. And then his wife comes up to him and touches him with the staff, and he falls asleep. When he wakes up, he's right outside the water, right where he was, and he thought it would just been a day or two. He looks up and sees the wedding procession coming across the bridge that was mentioned earlier, and he assumes that it's his bride to be that he had abandoned, Anna Malaya, because it's actually her daughter and they look so much alike. Um, and so he sort of says, you know what happened after that. I ran around for a while being a madman. The pastor finally explained everything to me, and he told me that 20 years had gone by when I thought it had only been a single day. And so he goes to a monastery. He becomes the Franciscan that he is now. The Franciscans were a very give up all your goods, a very poverty-based kind of a thing. So it's
Oh.
definitely emphasizing this sort of renunciation of the world.
Hmm.
Um, and he's at the monastery. He's repenting for his sins, and he's brought some gifts for Anna Malaya and her grandchildren. So I guess the young couple whose wedding he interrupted are now parents.
Hmm.
Um, Scene three. Scene four. Anna is on her deathbed sometime later when the monk reappears. He kneels down before her and puts her hands in his, and they both die. They sort of die in the same moment together. As they die, two white doves were seen flying out the window. The larger one had seven black flakes caught on its feet, but they fell off at the windowsill when the smaller dove came in contact with him. These flakes turned out to be scraps of paper with the names of the mermaid's seven children on them. And apparently, we are told that because the father had been so pious as a monk, he had also earned salvation for his sort of half mermaid children, and they too were able to enter heaven. So our happily ever after here is everybody dies and goes to heaven rather than gets married. um, and so, sort of the epilogue: one of the grandchildren goes to the stream to fetch some water to wash these two corpses, this monk and the grandmother, the original Anna Malaya. Prayers had already been said, and she reaches the bridge and is talking to a friend and says, "Oh, my grandmother just passed away, and her beloved Very has died as well." And so I guess grandma's story got told to everybody. It's sometime in those remaining years of her life. And then there's this soft whisper in the air of some voice asking, "Who died?" And the waters of the stream over which the bridge passes begin to stir, and these waves rise up into the air and they move towards the house. And the whole house is flooded, and the room with the two corpses, Very and Anamalaya, the corpses are tumbled around the room in the washing of the water. Everyone is terrified, and then someone throws holy water on the corpses, and this sort of invasive flood withdraws. But it leaves behind six additional corpses, handsome boys and beautiful girls between the ages of 10 and 17 with their feet bound. So here we have the mermaid's children again. And these children are holding scraps of paper with the words, "We have been redeemed," written on them. So it's nice somebody gave them official documentation. Among the corpses were the feet of a boy whose body was outlined on the floor as if it were a shadow. And the note next to him, because he doesn't have hands to hold it, but the note next to his feet says, "The body has been consumed, the soul endures." And this was the seventh child who had been sort of devoured by the mermaids. And his human feet, the one thing that marked him as unacceptable to live in the realm of the mermaids, are all that is left behind. But his feet and his soul have been redeemed as well. And it ends saying that on the anniversary of Crazy Very's death, also Animalaya's death, I'll add, but on the anniversary of Crazy Very's death, the stream begins to stir, and the next day waves will ripple towards its bank. But ever since he died, the moon no longer appears reflected in its waters. So
Hmm.
some sort of magic has been lost, for better or for worse, with the passing of Crazy Very.
Yeah, I think I mean we've talked maybe a little bit offline about how this story has a lot of dichotomies, and yeah, I think one of those is the magic versus the Christian law, the sort of old, you know, dreamlike, or I don't know, more flowing kind of pagan world or something, and the modern, more modern kind of Christian sort of law-based institutions kind of world.
Yeah, yeah, I think I looked up the name Veri because I was curious if it, was meant to mean anything. And it's, I mean, these tales were collected in Germany supposedly, so I don't want to make too many big assumptions, but the only name meaning I could find for Veri was Finnish. And the name Veri means blood in Finnish.
Mm,
At least according to internet name etymology websites. I'm no expert here. I just did a little bit of Googling,
mm,
but that would kind of match in with it being, him having some sort of tie to the blood of the land, the ancestral blood, the older ways of being. He's singing songs about the underworld. He's crazy. He's always daydreaming. He's never quite present. Um, which, I think when I imagine back to the days of pagan times, there is always this sense of the world being more porous and more dreamlike and more sort of the spirit world is more closely entwined with ours and it's not quite so differentiated. It just feels more kind of alive, but also less specific.
mm,
And I think, yeah, I think that's definitely a dichotomy we see here um, with Fairy and Anna
mm.
Mayala. I'm going to keep getting that wrong, but
Yeah,
people
I've
know
had to
who I mean.
practice so many times with that one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know. What did you think about that? Well, I guess I have something to say first. Just to not sort of lure you into saying something without putting my cards on the table first. That
Mm,
I'm raised Christian. I definitely appreciate the Christian teachings and well, I was raised Catholic, but I appreciate the Christian teachings. Um, and I think there's a lot to them, but I struggle with how to relate the teachings of Christ and the sort of unfolding of what he brought with the fact that it seems to always suppress something that had naturally grown indigenously to a certain landscape or within a certain people. I would imagine that, if I were in my hubris and arrogance, if I were to design how religion should work for humanity, I would want the higher level to come in and incorporate the lower level and have it feel welcomed and safe,
mm.
rather than this sort of like one against the other. One must, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of ways to look at that and such, but I have a romantic longing for the old days, the times of when the spirit world was closer and the realms were more porous. That I have a joy in my heart when I think about that. I'm sure the reality of it, were it to come about, would be a bit less than my romantic imaginings, but still, I think there's something lost. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to have more of that kind of longing, but I still have it with me now. Um, and I think I don't know there's different ways to to talk about it, or to incorporate or to bring to balance it out in one direction or the other. And you just said it in speech and just as a longing, but I mean people can give more of a lecture type of thing about that, or they can do it in literature. This is a folk tale that was written down as literature. There's rituals that we can do. There's all sorts of things that we can do that I think maybe I don't know. Yeah, are in words or images or bodily actions like with rituals that can sort of bring some of that oldness back, and maybe a new version of the oldness and some sort of naturalistic kind of religion. Um, I'm very, uh, I sort of think, the time in which we live is, we're no longer in the sort of more stable kind of neoliberal time. We're kind of in some weird mixture of like religious revival, psychedelics, conspiracy theories, AI, wars, all sorts of instability, and even chaos and violence, and new efforts and everything at institutions and integration. And I think some of that is probably some sort of good religious ritual kind of cultural kind of revival that I hope will bring something like the naturalists, something of an old and a new version of some kind of naturalistic kind of religion. Um, and I
Yeah.
think kind of balanced. I sort of um, I do I do also have something of that romantic feeling, but I also, from my understanding of the history and cult and different cultures, including the sort of primitive cultures, that there's a lot of bad stuff that happens in that more sort of porous natural environment, a lot of violence and a lot of yeah, basically a lot of violence. So so I think it and some the separation of people and literal walls and things like that is dampening some of the human spirit, and you do need some therapies and some different kinds of interactions and things to deal with that. I do think people are more alive in this sort of more natural kind of environment, but a lot of that aliveness I think is the old strong gods that I think we're kind of better off without as being the dominant sort of gods. So I sort of imagine something a little bit like what my understanding of what Japan has, where they have the Shintoism, where it's a naturalistic religion and a vague belief in like gods, local gods, and but also there's some more strict societal overlay and also a Buddhism and other things to sort of bring your mind up, so to speak, or to balance out sort of naturalism. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting picture you paint because I think you make a good point about the violence and the sort of archaic gods, the more, warlike or more forceful, more demanding, the Old Testament Yahweh, kind of a vibe. And I think one of the things that I forget in my romantic nostalgia is that you have like all of these gods were so if we look at it in sort of at least a pseudo scientific kind of way, like if we try and look at it with a little bit of logic, rationality, there's some sort of higher other realm that we can relate to, but that it's difficult to relate to as human beings, whether that's spirituality or religion or whatever you want to call it. It's
mm,
something meta. I
mm,
mean, metaphysics. It's physics, but it's the
mm,
meta level of the functioning of reality. It's not the
mm,
physical level. It's the upper
mm,
level, right? So humans, for all our goodness, like we sort of seem to have stumbled into that space, the ability to contact this higher space, whatever it is, without any like real guidance. There's not, like if dogs suddenly started speaking, we could go to the dogs and say, "Oh, hi, you've learned language. Let us tell you about how language works." And we'd be able to sort of guide them up the evolutionary ladder. I don't think that's going to happen, but just as an
mm,
example,
mm,
we as humans sort of reach this higher level. And maybe there are angels, maybe there are fairies, maybe there are any number of spirits that can communicate it with us, but it's not obvious. Like I can't be like, oh, well, I'm wondering about this existential thing. Hey, excuse me,
yeah.
Mr. Angel, can you give me some advice real quick? You know, maybe we can, maybe we can't do that, but it's not easy. It's not natural. So if you go back in time, humanity sort of is, growing out of their animal nature. They're developing rational thought. They're developing contact with these higher realms, and you'll have some people who have a stronger connection and they'll try and explain that connection to the people who maybe don't have as clear of a
Mm,
the shamans, the
mm,
wise men, the elders, whatever you
mm,
want to call them. They'll get a taste of the sort of structure promised by this higher realm, this
mm,
morality, this how to be in the world, this is our place, this is what we do, and they'll try and make sense of it for the people around them as best as they can. So we
mm,
have imperfect people trying to match something that they don't understand and communicate it to people who see even less than they do
mm,
in this particular way.
mm,
And over time, these things accumulate. They accumulate into tradition. They accumulate into ways. The Native Americans, I think this comes from them, is the idea of the original instructions,
mm,
the things that were passed on from the before time that you want to carry through and nurture,
mm,
sort of like healthy conservatism.
mm,
You want to carry the structure of culture forward and keep
mm,
it nourished and keep it strong.
mm,
The problem is that a lot of these cultures have a belief of this is a god, this is God or a pantheon of gods or a force, and this is the right way. And so because they're built as also social structures, this is how we need to behave. When that meets an other who
mm,
has a different social structure, there's almost like a chemical reaction or an electrical magnetic. There's like sparks flying,
mm,
there's static, there's friction, there's all this stuff going on. When I'm sure someone on both levels could be aware of, oh, these are actually, we're all pointing at the same thing. We're
mm,
all pointing at this higher realm that we can't quite eloquently explain as well as we wish we could. I don't understand how you've explained it to your people. I can barely explain it to my people. Can we even take the time to explain it to each other? No, we don't know who you are. You might be coming to take our women or our food. You might be trying to subjugate. We don't know who you are.
mm,
And we've always been afraid of the other.
mm,
That's something that's just built into human DNA. And I think, again, look at dogs, look at monkeys, look at like
mm,
ducks, geese, you approach a goose and they're going to chase you off. Like
mm,
it's very in the life forms of this world that we are protective against something coming in from
mm,
the outside.
mm,
It's interesting to wonder why that might be. I don't know, but like why is it so strongly built in? So we sort of have these human groups that are connected to this higher realm functioning in this way, but then battling against each other. And you have Christ kind of come in, the Christian teaching and the Buddhist teachings, and there are others as well, but those are sort of the main ones in the world today. Um, or even maybe not even the Christian teachings. You could even go back and say the Abrahamic teachings, because then you've got Judaism, Christianity, and Islam kind of all under that particular thing. And
mm,
then you've got the Buddha did actually come out of what we call Hinduism. That's sort of the
mm,
Vedantic tradition. He's not apart from that. He's sort of a flowering of it.
mm,
And so you've got at least those two. Um, you can argue it for others as well, Taoism and Shintoism, like you mentioned,
mm,
um, that are still active today and are much less violent. Like no Shinto is going to come up to me and like try and stab me because I'm not believing in the god of this fancy tree that they have. They don't care. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. But to get people from that place of we are all these little cultures like bacteria. We're all these little like we've been bred in these certain ways according to our understanding of this higher level. Um, to get all of them sort of functioning cohesively as a linked system, there should be some sort of overarching something that's going to have to come in and start trying to plug into all of them. Um, I think we in the West, and by that I sort of mean Europe in general, although that has now spread beyond the boundaries of Europe, I think there's a bit of a problem with the fact that our, higher level of religion, of Christianity, the teachings of Christ, came through on the tail end of the Roman Empire, which was not a religious thing. It was a political thing. It was a power thing. It was, oh, we're going to rule and we're going to create commerce and we're going to create this whole, human infrastructure. And then the Christianity kind of comes in and goes through that. But then you have um, Christianity. Man, I'm off on a tear here. You you have this sort of this level of religion being at odds with the older ways, um, in a way that, maybe Buddhism wasn't. You don't really hear about Buddhists and Hindus like going to war with each other, trying to convert. You don't hear about Buddhists and Taoists in China going to war with each other. They were pretty chill. That's where Zen comes from. It's sort of a mix of the two. There's a little bit in Tibet of the Buddhists coming in and having battles with demons. The indigenous Bon religion. There's some scuffle there, but you know, I don't know enough about how that went down, but it doesn't seem to have been quite as disastrous because Bon is still practiced and respected in Tibet.
Mm.
But in the West, Christianity came through and subjugated the people the same way the Roman Empire came through and subjugated the people physically. It was sort of like you will believe this and that's it. And I don't think that's Jesus's fault. If anything, I lay that at the feet of the Romans. But I think that's at least, if not an entire picture, it's at least an element of it that needs to be considered when we're talking about the relationship between the mermaids in the water and the beautiful poor woman that everybody loves, but for some reason doesn't manage to hold Very's attention when these mermaids start calling him.
Mm.
So just to kind of bring all that back.
Yeah, yeah, about Christianity's kind of conquering people. Um, yeah, I feel, yeah, that's not a very good history. Um, I mean, maybe in some ways it made some people less kind of, there was some bloodthirsty kinds of religions too in South America and the Aztecs and everything. But yeah, I I feel ambivalent about Jesus's teaching, which is sort of seems very clear, like love your neighbor as yourself. Basically, don't have real enemies, and certainly don't kill people you think are your enemies, and make your enemy your friend, something like that. And he who is without sin cast the first stone, and everything. The only thing I think that is in the Bible that he might have, and I wonder if he sort of really said this or whatever, but um, only through me can you get to the Father. So that starts to get a little bit like less of an invitation, and it starts to differentiate between those who can truly be saved. And what does saved mean if you put on it like you're an evil person, if you're not saved, you're a good person, if you are saved, you will go to heaven, you'll go to hell. If you start putting on that kind of metaphysics, it starts to get more and more like tribalism and kind of a justification of intolerance. So,
And that's interesting. It's almost like shadow material. It's like it's suppressing. It's because
mm,
the intolerance and the tribalism is the thing that it's saying, no, you don't get to do that. You
yeah.
have to follow my way. Like your way doesn't
Mm,
belong here. You have to follow my way. But
mm,
then the thing that suppresses the tribalism ends up creating the tribalism of are you saved or are you not saved?
mm,
Instead of it being more kind of ecumenical, more, you know, take care of the sick and help the poor and the widows
mm.
and, be friends and support each other, be be nice,
Yeah. Yeah, essentially,
yeah.
yeah, be loving, and through love you will grow in life, and you will become satisfied in life.
Yeah.
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 Um
I also wanted to add to something you said
mm,
about Jesus saying like only through me can you.
mhm,
I know it's not worded that way because he doesn't use me, he uses I,
mm,
but only I am the only way to the Father, something like that. Like
mm,
I I'm not going to say that that wasn't added as a proselytizing thing later on, but I also think it works in sort of a metaphysical way in that um, there's something about through meditative practices or stuff like that, there's something about focusing on the experience of I,
mm,
what that means to me. Like, oh, how do I know I'm me? What is me? What is I am? What is the sense I am me? Like, what does that feel like? When am I am, and when am I like distracted and lost in thought? And when am I not here? When am I not present? So there's some sort of a subtle cue there of like only through the sense of I do we only through sort of cohesing that within ourselves do we come to know the Father. Like we have to be a presence for the divine to interact with. Otherwise, we're scattered and there's nothing to interact with.
mm,
Um, but I'm of the mystical bent, and I like
mm,
I like to see, you know, specific practices or perspectives in things that are usually used to just beat people over the head with because it redeems them. For me, it redeems them. I can say, oh, this is what Jesus meant, and then he's not a colonizing asshole. He's trying to help people. He's not a fascist. He's not my way or the highway. He's like, no,
Mm,
this is actually the good. This is the path of the good
mm,
that will lead to, good things. And I want good things for you. So
mm,
why not? In fact, my it's very odd. My newsletter that I wrote today, over at the Kind Knife is very much about this sort of the kindness of God,
mm.
and how we sort of fail to receive it, really. But just an odd little aside and a little marketing plug. That's all.
Yeah, I had thought of Jesus as saying only through me you can get to the Father, sort of exclusionary, but yet you're kind of pointing to it as an a reminder that there are wrong ways, and kind of in the maybe spiritual mystical kind of realms, it's easy to lose focus and to go off into sometimes narcissistic or sometimes just all kinds of your own kind of wanderings that may not be very fruitful. And he's kind of reminding you to get on to a better path.
Yeah, crazy wild songs about the underworld.
Yeah, I was thinking of Veri too with this story as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, um I thought that's what a lot of this story was about how, I mean, in some ways Crazy Very is a heroic kind of uh character where he's very handsome. He falls in love with this beautiful girl, Anna Mayala, and they're gonna get married, but she's poor. She has lots of suitors, and he persists. He has some character, and then finally, like Odysseus and Penelope with the suitors, they go through some hardship, and he eventually, and there's some other parallels with the sirens here with Odysseus, but
Nice, nice. I hadn't even noticed.
but yeah, so and then and he's kind of wild. He kind of, yeah, like a mystic, he and or an artist. He has a connection to the underworld in some way, to another world. He's like a creative. They call him Crazy Very, but they seem to kind of love him. And but then yes, he does. I interpreted part of it is that yes, he comes to the stream, this liminal kind of place where there's a bridge, and which world are you going to be in? Are you going to make it over the bridge? There's a troll under the bridge or some kind of danger there. And as you were kind of pointing out, he starts to hear the little hint of the music, and he starts to go into it more and more. And there's a paragraph in the story where there's a circular kind of movement. He hears it and he listens more closely, and then it's more loud. And then he listens more closely, and then it's more salient to him. It's taking over his mind. And then the sense of vision takes over, and he sees her. Sense of touch, she goes up to him and she's on his shoulder. And then they she kind of gives him the terms of the contract. So are you sure? There's sort of this immediate charming attraction, this ferocious wanting to be with her, with each other maybe. And she gives him the terms of the contract, like, I've this is who I am. I'm a mermaid now, but I used to live above ground. And then so he could wonder, okay, how did that happen, or what is, who are you? But she identifies herself at least. And then I know that you have a bride here. Are you, you're going to forget her. Are you prepared to do that? She gives him all the terms of the contract. But as you pointed out, she kind of like stares at him in the eye too. So there's a sort of Medusa kind of thing going on, maybe. So, but I thought of that whole thing, that whole progression as, yeah, this is Crazy Very. His strength is his imagination, his spirit, but not necessarily his ability to reason, to to differentiate, to understand what is the types of decisions you have to make, the bridges you should cross, the bridges you shouldn't cross, the paths you should take, and so forth. And I thought that was hinted, that self-knowledge of his is hinted by the fact that he was, before he came to the bridge and the stream, he was annoyed with himself for letting time go by so much when he was hunting for the roebuck, so that he would not be able to spend the evening with his bride before their marriage. So,
Hmm.
sort of a
Yeah.
lack of maturity there.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting because I totally see what you're saying, and I completely agree with your reading of it. This sort of like he has like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you're saying he has this sort of call to rationality in the moment where he's disappointed with himself, but then sort of gives in to the imagination
That's what
and
I
is
think.
seduced by the mermaids. Which, so okay, so I had been looking at it differently. That particular scene before he actually meets the mermaids, and I think our two perspectives might actually like match well. Like I don't think they're at odds with each other. They might actually be pointing like two parts of the same idea. So I was thinking like he's a daydreamer, he's withdrawn, he's singing crazy songs all the time. So there's this sense of him being this creative person who's like easily distracted. Like there's not a place in his life for these creative urges to really manifest themselves.
That's what I
So
was
he's
thinking.
always he's always off somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so he's coming back with the roebuck with the deer, and he's annoyed with himself. Let me see. I wanted to get into the specific language here. Um, as he's walking back towards the village, his thoughts are not with his bride. Instead, his mind is wandering in the strangest of places. So he's being kind of seduced out.
Mm,
Um, and he reaches this footbridge, which you're right is very much like a "Are you going to cross?" It's a liminal space.
mm,
Um, and it says the moon had already risen, and he became annoyed with himself for being so late and missing the chance to spend the evening with his bride. Um, I'm trying to like enter into, oh, and then it says later, like in the next sentence, it describes the stream and the moon and the waters, and it says what he saw slowed him down and he grew melancholy.
mm,
So you have this guy who's been like out in the woods, hunting, not thinking of his wife, his mind wandering into the strangest of places, his creativity kind of going wild.
mm,
And a lot of guys before they get married, like there's uncertainty. There's some sort of a subconscious, unconscious, you see that rear its head in guys that like they cheat on their fiance the night before they hook up with like the stripper that got hired for their bachelor party or whatever. Like there's
mm,
something in them. There's some sort of a wildness in them that will not be, I don't want to say tamed because I don't want it to be like you're tamed when you're married, but there's something that won't submit to the union.
mm,
Um, and here we see sort of his craziness, his creativity, um, the thing he doesn't have room for in his life. He's been caught in that all day out in the woods, out hunting, and he's coming back, and there's this sense of like melancholy of like, oh, I didn't get to spend my chance with my wife. I'm really sad. And like I just feel the sense of this guy who doesn't have uh, a chance in his life to really go with these creative things, and feeling sad and feeling bad about himself and feeling like, oh man, I'm always crazy, Very. I'm always having these
mm,
weird dreams. What the
mm,
fuck? Who even am I? And he just gets melancholy and sad. And he's like, which is sparked by the moon and the water. It's sparked by the
mm.
already kind of mysterious vibes going on and
Yeah.
his previous state that he carries in. And that sort of gets him sad and like, sort of leaning over the water where he starts hearing the music. And then everything you say, he hears it. It gets louder. He hears it more. It gets closer. It gets louder. He gets closer. Suddenly he can see. Suddenly they're there. Suddenly they can talk. Suddenly she's touching him. Suddenly there's like direct person to person contact through the eyes. Like it's definitely a very call and response, like seduction of this guy into the water and away from this world, this life, this woman that he, kind of tie it back into that unwilling bachelor vibe. This woman that he's wooed and chased after and fought the suitors off of, and why would he all of a sudden abandon her? Like there's some element of his life that is not brought into this particular marriage, because otherwise there wouldn't be any part in him that would feel melancholy, that would feel sad, that would feel pulled away to um to these mermaids, to these sort of imaginary, maybe pagan, maybe spirits of the land, spirits of the water, definitely not in a church, um, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so yeah, yeah, the call for rationality, the call for strength, and also the need to acknowledge and feed the parts of ourselves that aren't easily fit into our lives so that they don't hijack us in these ways and they don't ruin us when we are trying to make a leap into some new way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had some breakups in my life that, not thankfully not on the altar, not the night before the wedding, but things where like there was something unconscious in me that my life wasn't satisfied by. And I projected it onto the relationship and made that the relationship's fault, and then couldn't settle, couldn't figure it out. And that sort of my unsettledness sort of broke the relationship. I
Yeah,
don't think
man.
I'm the only one that happened to, but I
No.
definitely can
Yeah.
speak to it.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
there's a lot of people out there with this kind of tragic story. Yeah, and this story kind of brings that out, right? Although before we go on with that strain, I would like to bring in the Odysseus where the so he's on his boat with his men trying to make his way home back to his wife, who has been waiting for him for a long time, who has a lot of suitors after her,
right.
and he has just gone through war. So it's in this story, Veri is it's much smaller. He's just been hunting, but still there's a martial element and all of that. Um, but yeah, Odysseus, they know that they're going to come to the sirens, so this is a great danger. There's even something about the female voice for a man, I think, can be a very powerful kind of thing. Also, the voice is what um the voice is what words come through, and words can convince you of things and all of that. Um and yeah, but he it's interesting that Odysseus, well, in that story, I won't go too much into it, but he tends to want to like experience all of human life. He takes things really to the edge. Like with the Cyclops, he kind of he taunts him and everything instead of just trying to survive.
Right, right.
And and so with the sirens, he decides he has the men bind him and he so that he can listen, and they have their ears stopped up with wax so that they won't be driven to crash their boat on the sirens rocky shores, whatever. So yeah, it's too bad Very when he hasn't had that life experience or that wisdom. Or I agree with you with the artistic kind of shamanic reading of the story, that he's young and unfortunately, yeah, he doesn't have a place in life. I think maybe he could have been some type of shaman or artist or yeah, creative. And if he had had that, he would know how to deal with the seductive, creative, strong energies of life and the world, and not had to literally go with them. Oh,
Yeah. And I will say, I love the reading of the sirens, and I think the sirens and the mermaid match quite well. But while we are talking about Odysseus, he does end up with what's her name? Circe, for
I
like
think Circe. Yeah,
a
yeah,
number of years, who's
yeah,
very bewitching,
yeah.
magical woman, and she holds him captive for I think 7 years, and then finally he has to. I don't remember how he leaves, if he like just sort of is like, okay, I'm sorry, I have to go, or if he like has to enchant her and like break a spell and like run. I should know that, but I'm forgetting my Odyssey at the moment. But in any case, even he with his rational approach to the sirens ends up kind of um, hooked by Circe, who is not, I will add, not a mermaid. She is fully a human, so a little bit different, a little bit different.
Is she a human though? I thought she's kind of a goddess, isn't she? I mean, she's kind of
Oh, maybe
living
she
out there.
is.
She
Maybe
she
she
has
is.
magical powers because she turns his men into pigs.
That's
So
right. That's
so
right.
yeah. So he does kind of sleep with her and everything, but uh, believe it or not, he seems to do it regretfully, and he goes back every night to like the seashore and crying, like longing for his home and wife. So
Oh, wow. Okay. Sort of under duress then. Definitely a different situation. Or at least he's putting on a good act. Or he's
yeah,
telling his wife, honey, every night I thought about you.
I swear.
I swear I was crying at the seashore. It was so sad. I had to stay with her 7 years. It was a magic thing. Don't worry about it. She put a spell on
It
me.
meant nothing.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
man.
there is. I think in that story, there's something besides. I mean, this is a time when like being a thief. This is from Homer is from a time, or the story is from a time when being a thief wasn't really considered like a bad thing. They talk about how Odysseus's grandfather was a thief, like it's just a career. Like, excuse me, sir. What are you? Are you a thief? Oh, okay, okay, that's cool. So.
That's cool.
So
I'm
I
a high
think
school
the
teacher. That's great.
Yeah. So I think the
Yeah.
morality is different, and maybe a married king with some type of mistress or something wasn't even considered like immoral. I thought that story was about how he cleverly avoids the tricks of Circe, and that seduce or whatever that his men get lured into. There's always this idea of you're being drawn into something and you transform in a bad way. Bring it back to
Mhm.
Veri. But
Right.
yeah, but yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, there's the interesting thing of Odysseus kind of, and the sirens and a proto kind of mermaid kind of women. Um,
Yeah, I mean, they are always in, classical paintings and stuff. They're always depicted as mermaids of some sort, or women on a rock in the
yeah.
waters, women of the waters. Like it's very, very similar imagery.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, which like I don't know where we are in the story, but that brings to mind to me the imagery that we're presented with, very strong imagery of the
Yeah.
the the mermaid wife and her
Yeah.
feet, that they're bound in ribbons. And I always think of mermaids as, they've got the fishtail, the Disney mermaid,
Yeah.
just it's, the hips and the fishtail.
Yeah.
Um, but here it seems to imply that although they are mermaids, they've got feet, but they're all wrapped up in ribbons. So
Hmm.
they're sort of there's this like ribbon. I don't know, in my mind at least, these were like brightly colored, beautiful ribbons.
Hmm.
Um, being wrapped in a ribbon rather than like a sack or a
Hmm.
cloth or,
Hmm.
bindings.
Hmm.
Something about calling it a ribbon implies this sort of mask of beauty. This sort of like, oh,
Hmm.
it's a pretty covering. Never mind why it's covered. It's very
Hmm.
pretty,
Hmm.
which I think is appropriate for what the story is kind of pointing to.
Hmm.
But I found it really interesting that he he can't take it. Common fairy tale motif of, whether it's like women, and the wife in Bluebeard's castle does the same thing. He says you must never go in this door. If you go in this door, it ruins our wedding. The myth, the legend, myth or legend of Cupid and Psyche. Psyche falls for Cupid. Cupid says you can never see me with the light on at night. She hides this lamp. She reveals him. Oh my God! Ends the marriage. Here, don't ever think about your wife. Don't ever long for your old life. And we sort of have that enacted through the symbology of the what's up with these feet? I don't get these. Why are they wrapped in ribbons? I gotta know. I gotta know the truth. I gotta know what's behind the covering. I gotta know. It looks pretty, but like what's really going on there?
Hmm.
And he unwraps it and he finds, wow, these creatures aren't human. Like I'm in love with some sort of I'm assuming because he reacts negatively, quite negatively to, oh my God, may my child finally be born with human feet, is his response. And I think um there's this sense of like, for me, there's this sense of feet being like the truest thing. Like they're the thing that contacts the earth. They're the part of us that is like
Hmm.
most grounded and real.
Hmm.
And so these creatures, like their feet, they're the place where they connect to their world, their physical world. Those feet they are made for water. They are like a duck's. They are webbed. They have claws. They are not human feet made for the ground.
Hmm.
And it's sort of this representation to me of his realization that this wife of his is made for a world that he does not belong in,
Yeah.
and that his children with her are made in this world. And it's painting this picture of a separation between like the world that has seduced him away from Anna Mayala, and yet his feet are human feet. Anna Mayala has human feet. Like that's the world his feet are structured to come into contact with. And then he prays for his last child to be born human, to be born in his world, and his prayers come true. Maybe he's got some shamanic powers, maybe he's got, some sort of a connection there, but his
Mm.
prayers come true. And in response, the world he is in reacts negatively to
Mm.
to the child that doesn't belong
Yeah.
and tears it apart, which that's pretty core archetypal stuff. The devouring mother, the mother who eats the parent that eats the child. And
Mm.
in the Greek myths, you have, I think, Kronos devouring the newly born god so they don't supplant him. Like
Mm.
there's a whole thing with the parent that devours the child. Um, but the mermaids do that, and that gives them power to seduce men. Um, and in that moment, we have Veri has this break of like, oh man, I don't belong here. He remembers that he doesn't belong here. He remembers that, his feet are made for the human world.
Mm.
And in fairy tales, once you have that realization, you were cast out. You were cast out of the other realm. You were cast out of the magical realm,
Yeah.
because you don't really belong there, or whatever, however you want to word it. In his case,
Yeah.
he's not made for it, and so he gets hit with the staff and wakes up 20 years later thinking it's the next day, which again, very common fairy realm myth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that reminded me a little of Rip Van Winkle. There's other types of stories like that, and that also made me and he thinks it's the same day or the next day or something like that, the day that he was supposed to be married, and that again emphasizes the dreamlike quality of his being down there in the water world and the underworld, and which is also shown in other ways, like the fact that he can wish something and then it magically happens,
Mhm.
or that time doesn't work the same way. Like where each time his wife becomes pregnant with a new child, the other child stops being an infant because, needs to make room for it's just that makes sense. And so that just happens. And
Yeah,
the time
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's not very logical, but
yeah. It just kind of fits in the way it needs to. That's really interesting. The tying of I mean, the fairy realm, at least in like Celtic mythology, the fairy realm is that it's the time is different. You never know where you're going to enter, when you're going to exit. This isn't Celtic, it's German, but they're not that disparate.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I hadn't really thought of that in connection with the aging of the children, but yeah, you're totally right. Like that's what the story needs. So that's what happens. And no, I don't mean just the fairy tale. I mean like the story that's taking place in the fairy realm. The fairy realm seems to be a place
mm,
more of story, of dream, of that kind of architecture where things don't make sense, but they happen the way they need to.
mm,
And him recognizing that sort of after the fact, or recognizing it, maybe not being bothered by it or whatever it is, but like he sees this happening and it's
yeah,
pointed out as kind of a strange thing, but he just kind of rolls with it or whatever. It doesn't
yeah,
seem to have much of a response, but it's sort of a hint or prelude to him finally unraveling the feet.
yeah,
That's like him not noticing that is leaving the feet raveled. And then when he's like when he's like, no, I have to see the truth of it. What is going on? Oh my God, this place isn't real. These women are built for living in this watery realm, and I'm lost, you know.
yeah, yeah. That evidence sort of accumulates in his head and builds the case where he eventually has to unbind their feet and uncover what's really happening.
Yeah.
That
Which in a way is kind of him finally pulling that sort of rational Odysseus move that you were talking about. It's like he's
Yeah,
finally grown up enough where he can't be satisfied with just the imaginal realm. He has to find the truth of it. And when he does, it sort of, I don't want to say it betrays him, but it shows that he betrayed himself,
yeah.
you know?
And like you pointed out, with it being all about feet, what keep you on the ground, it makes sense that that part of the body is what eventually brings him back to reality. His feet metaphorically, his feet weren't on the ground. He eventually, that's the fly in the ointment this whole time when he's down in the nether in the underground world. And I keep struggling which term to use, but
Yeah.
is this a
Underground,
dream? Is this
other
water?
world, dream world, fairy world, underwater.
Yeah,
It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Yeah.
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 And yeah, that makes sense that that's the fly in the ointment that eventually he has to use to build a case to understand what has been wrong or what he needed to do all along, and that and then when he comes back up, the for me a lot of the meaning of this story is, yeah, it's a tragedy of a young man in a small village who just wasn't guided, didn't have the structure or the guidance or the training or whatever, to kind of to know his way in life. He had love, but love is not enough. I mean his love with Anna Mayala. You need a career or a way. You need to be useful to society. And he has a beginning. He can hunt, but yeah, he's still in the dream. He's still dreamy and everything, and forgetting about his life because, yeah, like we're saying, he has a different purpose. It's in another time or place. It would be as some type of shaman or some type of artist or something like that. But he has a little village that doesn't have a place for that. And the tragedy is he kind of he's lost in the dream world and then comes back and he's 40 years old or something, and he doesn't have a place. And then it makes sense that he goes to the priest, and the priest finally explains this is what's happening in this world. And this it's kind of too late for him to have kind of taken his place as some type of, I don't know, romantic poet, or I don't know, something. And we can
Yeah.
talk about whether he should have really been a is there a place in that society for him, but it seems like definitely not in that village.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, um, I have something else I want to say, but I'll just go with this because it's alive in the moment. I'm like, let me bookmark that other thing. It's interesting that you're right. So the picture you painted, like he's got this sort of spiritual bent, this sort of tendency to connect to some sort of other world, some sort of non-physical, non-human kind of a something else. Um, and there's no place for him to really do that. And so that sort of leaves him open to falling into the seduction by the mermaids. And he comes back and he's has this wonderful moment, wonderful in a storytelling kind of a way.
Mm,
It's kind of unrealistic, but it's so beautiful what it sets up for his character of, oh my God, this woman who is getting married on this exact same day looks just like her mother, which is like, I'm like, oh, I don't believe that. But then because she does, he has this perfect moment of having his hopes and dreams seemingly be fulfilled. Of like, oh, I've been able to um this is the thing I was going to say. Apparently, it's coming in now.
uh,
I'm I'm able to make up for it. Oh,
yeah,
it hasn't been too long, and then and
yeah.
then and then sort of more wishful thinking. Maybe I can make this true. No, you're my bride. You're my bride. Who's this crazy man? Why is he chasing me off? And it's only when he goes to the priest, like you say,
Mm,
that he starts being set straight. And and then he goes off to become a monk, a friar. I forget. He joins the
mm,
Franciscans.
mm,
So he joins a religious order, and for the rest of the story, he's a religious man. He's a very pious. Whatever he does, it doesn't really say, but whatever he does, like he earns redemption for himself and his seven mermaid children, that's a lot of redemption. Um, bringing seven people with you is a big deal. So it kind of implies that, rather than being an artist or a romantic poet, he had this spiritual bent that finally got plugged into the church, moved the right way, and made up for his sort of youthful indiscretions. Um, which is, if you know Saint Augustine, that seems very
mm,
Augustinian with his backstory, but we don't have to go into that. He
mm,
he just had kind of a wild childhood himself.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it does sort of set up this shaman type figure who has no place in the world and can't be, there's no way to initiate his gifts, his tendencies.
Yeah.
Um, and those tendencies are the things that pull him away from the life he's trying to live. But then when he finally comes back and he tries to live it again, the church is the thing that helps him anchor those elements of himself in his life in a way that at least gives him a life and a living, if not returning him to his beloved, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I
it
will
gets
say, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, 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 please, please.
I will say, just to kind of finish that though, is both of them are described as looking ailing the entire
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
there's this sense of like they are they lack some vitality due to the fact that they are not together.
Yeah,
And
lovesick.
yeah.
And
So it's
even
not
to the
condemning it entirely, you know.
yeah, yeah. And but yeah, that's what I do appreciate that. Yeah, basically he and all of the kids and everything came to peace at the end of the story. But I can't help but regret and feel melancholy myself at what could have been. But this is a story that's educational in that way. Don't let yourself be seduced by the wrong things. Um, and yeah, that love sickness, even at the end of the story, yeah, her grandchild has been told of this is grandma's beloved Veri. It's obviously I do have a grandpa. He was a good, solid, loving man, and just like the husband of the younger Anna Mayala is presented as being a solid kind of good husband type material, but yeah, and solidly within this world of the village and the priest and away from the forest and the river and the bridge and all that stuff. Uh, you know, but not the romantic hair flowing kind of wild man kind of attractiveness who also can go into the forest and bring back the deer almost. But
Right, right. Yeah. Very is painted quite romantically in that sense. And yeah, I was picking up the same thing from both of the husbands of them just being like very solid guys, very dependable and reliable. And I'm gonna fight off this guy that's molesting my, which is good. If somebody's coming
yeah,
up and
yeah,
bothering your
good
woman, that's
husband,
good.
good man.
Yeah, exactly. But lacking that sort of
They
edge of
don't,
something
yeah,
otherly. Yeah,
yeah, they don't go into the forest and talk with the gods.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And I think what was I gonna say? Oh damn it. Um varies yeah, there's something about, you were saying that it's like a tragic tale, sort of a warning,
Mm,
don't let yourself be seduced, and I agree, and I think it's even a step beyond that. It goes towards like if you are seduced, like how do you find redemption on the other side?
mm,
And he
yeah,
does so by sort of selflessly dedicating his life to something greater.
yeah.
Um, as a Franciscan, like I was saying when I was reading the story, they were very much Saint Francis was born rich, went to war, came back, had visions, was told by a voice, was shown an image of a dilapidated church and heard a voice tell him, "You have to rebuild my house."
Mm,
And he converted. I don't know if he converted to Christianity. He became, he gave away all of his stuff,
mm,
spent all the money that he got like building this church, lived a life of absolute poverty, no belongings, preached, went to Rome, wanted to start this order of mendicant friars, was given by the Pope the permission, went back to I forget Germany or wherever he was, and like and built the order over time. So he's very much someone who, the Franciscans in particular are those who have renounced belongings, those who have renounced their part in society, which a shaman would do as well. They would live on the edge of the village. They would renounce sort of village life. They would sort of be separate in that way. It's not the
Mm.
same at all, but it still serves a similar social function. And I find that pretty interesting in the comparisons you're sort of pointing to here.
Yeah, thank you for that backstory. I didn't for me, his being a Franciscan monk was just like, okay, just monk. But then
Mm,
I noticed he gave away the stuff I didn't understand to the grandchildren, didn't quite understand that. But his life sort of parallels then is it Saint Francis
mhm.
or
I believe, yeah, I believe this is Saint Francis of Assisi. I'm almost positive, yeah,
hmm,
that that's where all of this comes from.
hmm. But yeah,
And
his
he
life.
could talk to animals supposedly.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. And but yeah, so his life seems to kind of parallel that with giving things away, and he's also celibate after he sort of has the the watery kind of romance with the mermaid
Yeah,
below in the stream.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He does kind of go full monastic at that point. Um, yeah, it's interesting.
What do you think about the you had pointed to that there is the repetition of Anna Mayala, and that is also the name of the story. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm thinking of time in terms of either is time and history linear or is it circular? But what do you think about the name of the story in Anna Mayala, how she repeats through her daughter?
That's interesting. That's interesting. I hadn't
That's
really
one
thought
reason
about
I
it that
like
way.
this story.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think Anne means grace. I think that's
Oh,
Hebrew for grace.
that's great.
Yeah, I'm almost positive about that. I might be mixing it up with another name, but I'm pretty
Mm,
sure that's what it means. Mayala, no idea, no idea what that is. But this idea of her, like the repetition of her, um, and you're pointing out that like the story like is named for like her name is the title of the story. Like it sort of highlights her importance, but she's not in the story at all. It's all about Veri, and then she sort of shows up around Veri's story. So that's really interesting. And I think what I'm seeing is like Veri is seduced by something watery and changing and inconsistent and
mm,
dreamlike and whatever. And here
mm,
you have Anna Mayala, at least symbolically in the story, remains the same.
yeah.
Her even down to her granddaughter. We don't find out that her granddaughter is beautiful and about to be
Hmm.
married because she's not serving that role, but she
Mm,
is likewise coming over the bridge. She is
mm,
likewise like having that be an important part of her life. And so we see sort of three generations of these women who, at least two of which are described as indescribably beautiful, very beautiful, and fulfill the bride role. And there's almost this sense of them being the eternal held up against the washing temporal of the mermaids. And I had not thought of that. That's really cool. That's really cool.
yeah, it's almost, I thought of it like repeating like a theme in a song. Now I don't know much about music, but I sort of had the idea this is, yeah, there's eternity. There's this eternal kind of repetition, this circular thing. And yeah, Very with his actions and his nature. He is all over the place, kind of, and he's returning back to Anna Mayala, and kind of tragically because he goes way too off the beaten path and doesn't come back until it's too late. But yeah, there's these two natures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that the repetition through time. It makes me think of um like the solstice, the the Jesus's birthday is on Christmas because it matches up with the solstice story.
Oh,
The solstice being like the darkest point of the year.
huh.
The repetition being like, because if you're listening to music, you're bound in time. And the song goes along and you're sort of following the song. But
Yeah.
if there's a repetitive motion or there's a repetitive motif or the same,
Yeah.
the
It's
same bit comes
circular.
through, if Anna Mayala shows up and then Anna Mayala shows up and then Anna Mayala shows up,
Yeah.
it points to like both time and eternity kind of
Yeah.
together at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think of the solstice as being the same thing of sort of this like eternal returning of something that feels like it's going to go and then it comes back. Feels like it's going to go and come
Yeah.
back. And there being something very deeply human about needing that kind of story infusion into our lives on a
Yeah.
level that isn't intellectual, but that is like
Yeah.
societal, mythological, deeply rooted something that we need to
Yeah.
be reminded of that rebirth, that eternity in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that mixture. Yeah, we need the linearity, right? I mean, we're born at some point, we die at some point, stuff happened before, stuff happens later, and we know that. But we also need this recurrence, right? We don't want things to be constantly changing all the time, different every time. Although there's maybe interesting sort of mindfulness kind of thing of realizing all of that. But anyway, I don't think we're
Well,
we're talking about that, but
Well, I would just say to that, no, I think you're totally right in that what the mindfulness thing that you're talking about is you purposefully experience the changing, so that it reveals the eternal that's inside of you. That's
mm,
meditation is if you get lost in thought, you come back to your breath. It's like you're you're coming back to something that anchors you to the present, and the present is eternal. Present is always the
right,
present, and
right,
it's never not the present.
right.
The past and the future aren't they don't really exist except as
Right.
memories. The only thing we actually experience is the present, and it never isn't that. So it's an eternity in a kind of a sense.
Right. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I'm
And the
getting a
even the
little ahead of
word
my pay grade, but it's interesting stuff.
no, it really is. Yeah, for me as well. And yeah, the etymology of the word that we get that we translate into mindfulness is sati, and the idea is remembering, right? Which is
Hmm.
interesting because it's not about nostalgia. It's not about thinking back to the past or analyzing it or something like that, but it's something about being present, but it being like a memory in some way when you're really
Hmm.
deeply in the present.
Yeah. I think of it as like when you have a memory and you know you have a memory, and you have a clear memory, you know for sure how something happened. At least for your own subjective purposes. I'm not talking about yeah, memory is not objective. It doesn't work that way, but you can be like, oh yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was doing this at this time with this person. That's when I heard that song the first time, whatever it is. Like it kind of clicks, something clicks when you have a clear memory. To
Mm.
have the present moment click in that same way. Like you are aware of what's going on. You know what's on every level. Like you're just sort of present to it in the
Yeah.
same way that when a memory is present to you, you have the full memory. The real world, this present moment is present to you in a way that I don't want to say feels like a memory, but also I think that creates memory the best way. If we're actually present to it, it
I
will
think
it
so,
will
yeah.
be built into our sort of structures. So
Is one thing about it's sort of like if you're truly present, everything kind of makes sense, kind of like a memory does, like you're encoding it in a way where you feel like you understand it
yeah,
and
yeah.
not intellectually where you're analyzing this thing and that thing, although, but yeah, where you're understanding it as a kind of whole and there's no sort of like this story, there's no rejection that this is not real. This is not right in some way. There's no
Mhm.
fly in the ointment. It's all
Mhm.
ointment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I really liked the sort of feet as the fly in the ointment. The feet as the like the itch that won't go away, that sort of wakes him up to the reality of his situation. And you're pointing to, when you're present in the moment and there is no residue, there is no thing, like you're fully present to your experience in a way that you're actually remembering it, and all of it is including whatever memories might be coming up, because those are in the present moment too, but you're present to
Yeah.
all of that. Like there is nothing, there is no fly in the ointment. There is no thing that wants your attention, because everything that's happening already has your attention and you're not blocking any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being like that, I mean, being in some way enlightened isn't that a way, if you can bring yourself into that kind of consciousness, aren't you pretty peaceful and able to connect with the world outside your body and other people and other minds in a pretty fruitful way, and to serve others?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think of it kind of in a like backwards kind of a way, maybe. So like to try and explain that, like naturally, I mean, I guess maybe this gets into Rousseau. I don't know, you'll have to tell me, but like naturally, all of these things where we can feel the other person, where we know what's going on, like that's already happening
Mm,
in our
yeah,
nervous system somewhere.
yeah.
Um, and then at some point we start building these layers or these buffers or these protective things where like, oh, we don't want to see this part of reality. We don't want to see that part, you know. Um, and then we sort of get to a point where we're like, oh, like, wow, there's things I don't see. I don't know what's going on, kind of forgetting that we have blocked these other elements because maybe they happen
Mm,
when we're very young or
mm,
who knows any, whatever reason, maybe ancestrally something comes
mm,
down the line, whatever it is.
yeah.
But what you're talking about, this sort of enlightened kind of a thing, I think of it as like almost like if we exist as this sort of, I don't know, I think of it as sort of like a crystalline structure, you
Mm,
know. And at the core of it, like it's very clear. It's very
mm,
pure, clear. It is what it is. It's just sort of you can also use like a water metaphor, like it's a spring, like there's something bubbling up there.
mm,
There's a coming throughness, and if we can just rest in that, that's sort of what you're talking about as enlightened. Like we're able to connect with people, we're able to just be more joyful in the world. We're less caught up in
mm,
things needing to be a certain way or getting caught up in these sort of obsessive thoughts or these sort
mm,
of troubling emotions. Like those are all, maybe the seeds of those are there, but they don't grow. They don't pull us out of this sort of central clear, bubbling crystal spring metaphor that I'm struggling to build. But then, you know, as things complicate our lives, or as we decide, oh well, I can't relate to this part of myself because there's no room for it, whatever
mm,
that part might be. My anger, my vulnerability, you know, my sexuality, my desire to be creative, my desire to be smart. If people are like, oh, look at you, Mr. Smarty Pants thinks he knows everything, like you might shame yourself into being, you know, less coming across as less smart than you are. All of those things are like you've already got a thing that's real and you're saying it can't exist. So now you've got a conflict inside yourself,
mm,
and that's uncomfortable. And it's always going to be uncomfortable because you're at a conflict with yourself, and you have to create some sort of a rule or a structure for yourself about how to deal with that. Maybe it
mm,
gets projected onto other people. No, I hate those people. They always do this thing.
mm,
They do this thing that if I were to pay attention to what they were doing, it would remind me that
mm,
that thing exists in me. And
mm,
wow, I wish I did that thing didn't exist in me, but I also wish it did exist in me. I
mm,
wish I could just be wild and crazy like they can be,
mm,
but I can't and they can't, and they remind me of it, and I hate them for it. And they should all
mm,
be locked up because they're crazy people, you
mm,
know? So all of those things kind of build these layers outside of this sort of pure initial core.
mm,
And when you know when you and I as adults get to a point where we're like, hey, like what's life about and what's my personality about? Which I would say on average, like the brain fully forms when you're 26. So you could go as far as to say, you know, up until you're 26, these things are still not making sense. But
mm,
at that point, you're sort of locked into whatever structure you have built around this initial sort of clear spring, and you have to kind of dismantle it, and you have to kind of, I don't know how, I can't, there's no formula for how to do that, but the enlightenment element that you're looking for, that you're talking about, that we're all looking for, is like it's a retracting back into that initial
mm,
channel and not needing to be caught up defensively in all of these additional structures that we built. And
mm,
so like I forget how that ties into the story. That was a lot to kind of try and hold, but the idea being that I think it even says in the Tao Te Ching something like when you're studying knowledge every day, you add more information. And when you're studying the Tao every day, you drop something, you leave something behind, you drop something off, you get rid of something.
mm,
I think I mean, I'm not trained in any sort of Taoist lineage, but I imagine they're talking about something like that. sort of a returning to an initial thing that already exists and is already there, but we forget. And then we try, and then often I'm guilty of this myself. I'll think of like, ooh, if I could just get the enlightened thing and bring it closer to me, then I'd be okay. But I can't get something that exists in here. I can't reach out and grab something that I need to let go of other things in order to be able to rest inside that's already mine. Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but I find it helpful to hold this kind of a view about it because it stops me from thinking if I just had the right, if I just got the right book, if I just read the right fairy tale, if I just did the right practice enough times forever, then I perfectly get the exact thing that I need. Um, it's much more helpful for me to think, oh, I have the thing that I need, and I'm complicating it more than I need to, and then stepping back into myself and trying to understand what it is that I'm doing, because that's really, I think, the work in our life is coming to understand these sort of psychological machines that we take to be ourselves, but are just things that we put in play to protect us or to do certain things. And
Mm,
we forget that we made them and we can take them apart,
mm.
with the right amount of attention and the right amount of effort and time, really. It's not something that we can necessarily do a lot about.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, yeah,
Yeah, I like that we've talked about the being needs and the having needs, and sometimes treating a need that you have to be, and you're trying to get something, get a book, get a piece of knowledge, get the right something, and it's good to remember that it's already inside, and you have to. I don't know how to finish that sentence, but you have to let it happen. And then, yeah,
yeah,
you don't also want to rush it too.
yeah. Yeah, because I think rushing it is like again trying, you have this idea of what it means, and so rushing it is like you're trying to pull the idea closer, even if it's a good idea, even if it matches, like you're still relating to an idea about what it's supposed to be. If you relate to the thing as it's actually going on, you can't rush it because it's already happening.
Right. Yeah.
So you're just tuning into what's already happening to a better degree until the truth of it, when you see something truly, if it's not helpful, you just stop doing it. you know um I
Yeah.
forget,
Because you're not.
we were talking about the cigarette smoking, I think last episode, was
Mhm.
that last
Yeah, I
week?
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think so. I'll refer people to the last episode I was on. I don't even remember what it was about. Oh, it was the Rousseau one. It was the one with the Rousseau. We ended up
Okay.
talking about that, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just the when you see the reality of what you're doing fully, when you see it as a whole, like the good parts you keep and the bad parts you don't have to force yourself to stop doing. You just stop doing them because they're not attractive anymore.
Yeah.
Similarly to Veri, when he unwraps the things and he's like, "Oh my God, no, this isn't seductive at all. These feet are terrible for whatever reason."
Yeah.
Um, he just, at that point, it breaks the spell, the magic spell, the other world breaks, and he's cast out of it, which ultimately is a good thing for him if these things aren't real, if they're just these sort of psychological projections that I'm talking about. You get lost in them as you see them truly, as you unwrap their feet, you see who they are. You are cast out of that particular illusion that you've been living under, and you
Yeah.
come back to reality, and then you have to deal with what reality has been the whole time you were lost in illusion. And
Yeah.
that can be really painful. And I think
Yeah.
if we have a loving God who understands that, we come here to be challenged by these illusions and try and break free of them, like there's a degree to which our illusions are like necessary for a certain amount of time. You don't want to take them all away at once. We are too bound up in them
Yeah.
individually. We're too bound up in them. So it's our job to sort of slowly disentangle ourselves. And as we do that, then we can respond to whatever the call of the divine or whatever it is. We can respond to the present moment more fully. We can be that enlightened, kind of joyful, at peace, relating to other people, being in nature, like all this sort of metaphorical tropes that we hold up as examples of what an enlightened person is. Like it's much easier to be those things when we aren't caught in these other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I agree. You don't want to, not that it would be useful anyway, but in an ideal world, you would not have someone just be a magical Prospero or whatever to just whisk away all our illusions. Yeah, they're a part of what we've already developed as, and we need to slowly, kind of pare them back, or maybe better, just let them fade and
Yeah.
kind of keep our eye on what is real.
Yeah. And I would even go further to say that, like, if the illusions were to be taken away, we would remain who we are, which is
Mm,
someone who is subject to, who believes these illusions, you know.
that
Um,
sounds right to me.
and if they were, if they aren't taken away, then every illusion is a possibility for growth. It becomes like, as we learn about what's going on, we learn about ourselves, we learn about the world, we learn some, like the illusion itself holds a lesson. The fact that it's an illusion we're believing in is like, that makes it something that we can pick apart and
Mm,
learn something new from. And so we're like, we want our illusions because we need something. They're like weights in the gym. We need to, like, if you go to the gym and you're like, oh, I'm struggling to lift this weight, and God comes through and is like, oh, you don't have to lift that weight. Never
yeah, I'll
mind.
just
You're
make you strong.
Well, no, you that's the thing. God can't make you strong,
Yeah,
right? You don't get strong. You need the weight. You need to work press against the weight to build your strength.
yeah,
And the same thing with the illusions. Like, you need to work with the illusions to build your being, to build your mind, to build your yourself in the world, to see the truth of who you are. And again, it's that retreating back, the retracting back into the truth, but you're still building the ability to recognize truth and falsehood, what's
yeah,
true, what's not. And you sort of, as you recognize the falsehoods, they just, whew, they're gone. And you become more and more true. And all of our illusions are our particular falsehoods that we're given to, like, work on in our life. And if those were taken away, what would we do? Sit around and watch TV all day? Like, we wouldn't.
yeah,
There's not a lot to inspire us to engage in the world,
yeah.
until we've engaged in it so much we see the beauty of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I was thinking of maybe that's part of the idea of Jesus, is that God setting himself or his son to go through that human difficulty, the temptation, the distraction, the and all of that, and living through that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I will say that for the Christ myth, that, like, it is very powerful. I think if we unpack it in that sense, because, like, with the light, the way you're describing it, because you have, like, even God, when God comes down and takes a human form, even God is betrayed, is cannot manage the political machinations of other human beings, is a very good person put to death in a very painful way, um, and
Humiliating.
humiliating, and like, there's a through all of that, there's sort of a redemptive story that God is trying to hint at, of like, this is the purpose of life. Like,
Mm,
you're not supposed to win at life.
mm, yeah.
You're supposed to sort of follow. I don't know what, like, what am I going to say? Here's the meaning to life, right? But,
Yeah.
like, there's something in the Christ myth of pick up your cross, carry your suffering, carry, as we were talking about it a minute ago, carry your illusion through to the end, see it to the end, even if it kills you in
Mm,
humiliation. Christ is resurrected.
mm,
If you feel like you lose something, if you just carry on, not blindly, words can be so fucking tricky, but if you don't give up, um, like, it will be returned to you. I mean, that's, Sarah and Abraham didn't think they were going to have kids. They finally get to have kids.
mm,
The prodigal son wastes all his goods and then is brought back and is given a feast. It's this story is repeated again and again throughout the Bible of sort of sacrifice and redemption. And here we see God doing it as well, to sort of justify, like, no, like, even I'm not above this.
mm.
This is the life in this realm asks this of you. This is
Mm,
what human life means. And if you engage in it willingly, you will be redeemed and reborn and resurrected. And um, the kingdom, what is it from the Gospel of Thomas? The kingdom of earth is the kingdom of heaven is spread across the earth, and men don't see it. Humans don't see it.
mm,
Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but
mm.
it's we're resurrected to this life as it's meant to be, which is that retreating back into that central core of connectedness to the eternal and acting in the time bound way from that place is joyful, is enlightenment, is being friendly with other people, is much more ease. It's that's to me, that's the resurrection. We die to these illusions again and again and again. Each illusion is a cross that we carry until we die upon it. Once that dies, then we are reborn closer. And every time, every piece sort of builds in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good as the suffering and death and resurrection as an educational metaphor to kind of a myth to keep in our minds that we can do this throughout life.
Yeah, because the alternative to believing that story is that we can't, and that all of our troubles, all of our struggles are hopeless and insolvable, and we might as well just go. I mean, fill in your vice. We might as well just go get drunk. We might as well just
Yeah.
go scroll Facebook. We might as well just go like hook up with random people on Tinder because we're never going to find somebody who actually cares about us. Well, if you look at why you're having a hard time connecting with people, if you pick up the cross of the difficulty of relating, if you hold up the desire of I want somebody who actually cares about me as a human being, but still lets me sort of be myself. How do I find that? Who is myself? How do I relate to people in a way that's healthy? Like
Mm,
that's a challenge, that's a cross. And
mm,
and to sort of die upon that cross is the you that believes you can never find a meaningful partner, to kind of continue this metaphor I'm running with.
mm,
Um, that belief in yourself as the person who cannot do it has to die.
mm,
And then you are reborn as, oh, like I had this whole illusion all along that I was dragging behind me, this cross I didn't need. But you have to go all the way through to the end of it. You have to be fully
mm,
crucified upon it and buried in the tomb. And then once you're fully surrendered in that way, I couldn't do it. Um, maybe something happens. I don't know. I'll let you know if I find out.
mm. And
Yeah.
I keep thinking about this in terms of the story, Anna Mayala, and I don't know. I guess it's just that, it's a story that kind of instructs you on maybe one particular kind of what I think of as a tragic playing out of a type of character who is kind of very imaginative and has a lot of promise, but ends up being seduced by those promises and doesn't, yeah, doesn't have that development to kind of know how to balance out that part of himself and not to know how to use his knowledge of the underworld, of the other world, um, that is shown by his being able to sing the songs of it. And that's it. Singing songs, is this, there's this spirit, this breath that's coming from this energy that's coming from this other realm, and the order too, and some instruction probably, but and maybe this is even interestingly related historically to the pre-Christian pagan or even sometimes coexisting somewhat in the underground pagan or other naturalistic kind of religion, whatever you want to call it, kind of survival uh, in a more medieval or modern Christian kind of society, but not knowing, yeah, very not knowing, very could, yeah, blood or maybe even the Latin truth,
Mhm.
but not knowing how to bring forth that, or maybe not having the society that's kind of, they call him crazy Barry. They seem to love and accept him, but they don't understand him, and they're not able to merge and for him to play a role, and then yeah, he gets sucked into the other thing,
Yeah.
the other realm.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very I like that blood and truth as both ways of interpreting that name. Is, the if we're talking about blood as ancestral and truth as in like an ancestral truth, like yeah, he's trying to find a place for that and there's no place for it. And that can be very chaotic and disruptive to his trying to live his life, to the point where the power of that call, because there's no way to respond to it in his life, it pulls him off his path, pulls him off the social path that's sort of the common way to go, and he ends up, wandering in the desert for, I guess, 20 years or whatever, wandering in the fairy realm for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And giving up his love and the other life he could have had. So
yeah, yeah,
that's why this story's kind of poignant for me. It's the what could have been, the nostalgia and all that.
yeah.
What does this story have an emotional appeal for you?
Um, there's definitely, I mean, I sort of hinted at it earlier. There's definitely the past relationships I've had where I look back on it now and it's like, oh, I was seduced by my own mermaids, my
Mm-hmm.
own ideas of like, oh, why am I not happy in this relationship and how is this going to go, and breakups that were not handled well, and coming back afterwards and being like, oh no, we were supposed to be together and but it didn't work out, and the sort of longing that you can carry for, the first person that you sort of have that bond with. But I also think that changes through time. Um, and I don't think it's necessarily as black and white as the story makes it of, if you fuck up that first time, then like that's it. You've lost it and you're never gonna, feel love again, however you want to put it. And you might as well just go be a monk
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and be very pious. And that's the only way you're gonna like redeem yourself. I would have liked him in from this perspective, from the emotional, emotionally resonant perspective, I would have liked him and Anna Mayala to have like somehow gotten together in their later years. Maybe he, instead of her dying and him coming up and being like, ah, we are together now in death.
Yeah.
They would have
Two
had like
doves.
yeah, they would have been like come together, the last 10 years of her life. Maybe her husband passed and he finally like is like, okay, are you available? Like, can we see what's here? I've been waiting for you at the monastery, and if you were never available, like I was ready to be a monk the rest of my life, but here you are, you're a widow. I still love you. Can we see where this goes? Like that would have been tearing at my heartstrings. That's a
Yeah, me
classic.
too.
That's a classic romance right there. Um, as it is just kind of sad. So,
Yeah.
which has its own, like you said, it has its own lesson there. So I'm not saying it's bad for that. It's just as far as like the emotional resonance of it, um, is more sort of sad when I would want something redemptive other than, well, now you're dead, but your children are dead and they're going to heaven too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if this could be expanded in a modern version, you might have some poignant kind of, yeah, getting together after her husband dies. It is interesting that her husband dies and then they both remain sort of celibate and pious the rest of the story, and then they're only reunited in death. Perhaps some of that is because of maybe religious strictures against remarriage and things. I guess we used to think of marriage is it only happens once in your life, and then I think there's some parts of the Bible that even talk about debate or maybe condemn like someone for getting remarried after they're a widow or a widower or something like that,
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
because of holy
Yeah.
matrimony, so. And
Yeah.
maybe he's kind of
We-
a like a poisoned person because he went down, and or maybe it went down and was with a mermaid and had children with her and everything. There's something wrong about that, and maybe he's also considered still married in some way or something. So
that's true. Because he never actually married Anna Mayala. And he had 7 kids with the mermaid, so that's marriage enough.
yeah,
And there's also the fact that he takes monastic vows. So
Mm.
for him to break those maybe
Pretty
would
big
not
deal.
paint him as such a hero in that case, especially in the worldview at the time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I were to retell this as like a modern story, if I would necessarily take away that sort of tragic element to it. It would depend on, I guess, how the story kind of unfolded itself under that new structure. But
Mm.
because there's something to the like the penance of it, the like,
Yeah.
if Anna Mayala is sort of this symbol for the eternal, then once you're caught up in the time bound, your best shot at the eternity is after death.
Yeah.
That you're sort of stuck here until you manage to you gotta wait out the clock.
Yeah. Yeah, you've played your hand in this world, and I mean, I'm messing up the metaphor, but you've gotten your hand and you've played it now in this world, and you have to live with the consequences. There's something very finally has to be solid in life. He's been his mind has been all over the place, and his life has been all over the place. He's been wandering around, and now he has to commit to something. He didn't get married, he didn't settle down, and he was wandering around. He didn't know what was going on. Finally the priest kind of told it to him straight, and now, yeah, he has to live out that this life. And there's something catching about that.
Yeah,
And
very
then the
poignant. Yeah.
yeah, and then there's the beautiful kind of the doves and everything going off, and then of course they bring the whole story back at the end with the mermaid still kind of loves him, and is uh, there's this gushing over of the stream when she hears from Anima Yala's granddaughter that Veri has passed, and gushing over the stream, washing over into the room where they're at, and kind of moving their corpses around, and only the modern kind of putting of holy water on it can put a stop to that overflowing kind of passion.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of emotion of the other realm of the ancestral of the spirit world, that kind of welling up.
Yeah,
Um,
without boundary.
yeah, yeah, boundaryless. Yeah, 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 and the whole and the holy water against, I guess, unholy water, um, is an interesting combination. And then it leaves behind his children, the bodies of his children,
Yeah,
which kind of sad they had to die, I guess. Um, but they're redeemed, so everybody kind of lives happily ever after in heaven,
yeah,
which I guess is appropriate for the 1600s or whenever, whenever
yeah.
that was. I'd rather live happily ever after. Uh, well, I don't know. I was going to say now, but I also am not sure that that's possible. Life is always presenting us with challenges and for growth, so it's complicated.
Wait, what do you mean you'd rather live? You're just saying rather than in the 1600s, but maybe not. It's hard to
Well,
say.
I'm saying rather than living happily ever after in heaven, I'd rather I'd
Yeah,
rather have a shot at living some sort of happily ever after, like in this life.
yeah,
I feel like there's a way that this life can be seen as a gift from God if we live it well, and that God loves us and redemption is possible. Rather than like you were saying, you kind of dealt your hand and that's it. Like you do have to live with the consequences of your decisions, but to
yeah,
say that those decisions preclude you from some sort of rebirth or redemption in this life, or a resurrection of some old part of yourself that you thought you'd had to give up but can come back and live again. Um, I don't know. I don't want to believe that it's impossible. I do know that it's not possible for everybody. Like I don't know how it
yeah,
works, and I don't want to be like, well, if you're suffering from tragedy, it's because you haven't tried hard enough.
yeah,
That's not helpful or happy for anybody. But when it comes to my belief about myself and my life, which is the thing I'm responsible for, I always want to believe that I can want to say make up for my failures because like that I don't need to suffer eternally, maybe.
Yeah.
That the redemption is possible. It's maybe out of my hands. Maybe there are things I can do to lower the resistance to redemption being given to me, sort of
Hmm.
in regards to sort of map it onto the Enlightenment language. Like they say enlightenment is an accident, but practice makes you accident prone.
Hmm.
Like forgiveness, redemption comes at God's hand, at God's will. I can't force it. I can't guarantee it. I can't make a formula that says do X, Y, and Z and you'll be redeemed. But if I say, well, I'm never going to be redeemed, I'm also refusing to accept it if it comes.
Hmm.
And so being able to kind of hold that space of like, if redemption comes for whatever element of myself we're talking about, if redemption comes, I'm willing to accept it. I don't need to define myself as irredeemable. I think we could all do with a little bit of breathing room around that because the sort of Christian worldview we've inherited is one of like, you're saved or you're damned. And if
Hmm.
you sin, you're probably going to go to hell unless you do these purity rituals that like ensure that you're saved and you got to keep doing them and you're never really sure and you got to make sure if you're a Catholic you're shriven when you die, you get the blessing when you die. So and then because that becomes so formulaic, it's like, oh well, can't I just buy forgiveness? Sure,
Yeah.
here, how much are you going to give to the Pope? Like, oh, you're
Yeah.
forgiven, go kill some more infidels. That's great,
Yeah.
buddy. It twists the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree that. And going back to the beginning, what you said, just a heaven in the other world. I mean, I think that can be a salutary teaching in some ways, and maybe it's necessary for some people or sometimes, but I much more feel there is hope and goodness in at least in addition to, or maybe if you have to choose between one or the other, seeing the heaven on earth here and not in a, covering your eyes to the evil and suffering, but in a much more complex kind of way, receiving the graceful sight to see things as good and to come into a good life here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Amen.
okay. Well, maybe next time come up we'll find a different story or bring in some Rousseau or who knows, kind
Who
of plan
knows?
for the
We were
next one.
talking about machines prior to recording this one, so maybe we can look into machines and AI and psychological mechanisms and whatnot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that sounds good.
cool. We'll
Okay.
see.
Okay. Okay, we'll talk to you then. Take care.